Presidential candidate Michael Bennet makes his case with the Iowa caucuses closing in. Welcome to this special edition. We are joined by Senator Michael Bennet. Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We had a whole bunch of questions. We're going to try to rip through these as quickly as we can here, so no filibustering.
Short answers.
All right, short answers if you would. Let's lead off here right off the bat. We got a question from Nicholas, and he had a very simple, basic question for you. Who is Michael Bennet?
Michael Bennet is the father of 3 daughters. I've come from Colorado. I'm the only person in this race who's won 2 national elections in a swing state. I've been in the Senate for 10 years, which is long enough to know how to get some things done, but also why the most important things for our families never seem to get done. Before that, I had a lifetime outside of politics. I was in business for a while, and then I was superintendent of the Denver Public Schools, which is an urban school district of 95,000 kids.
We had a lot of education questions. We'll get to those in a couple of segments. Phyllis had written in, and she wants a comparison from you. How do you think your agenda is different? And she brought up specifically Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren.
Well, I think their agenda basically boils down to offering the American people a bunch of free stuff, unfunded programs, and empty promises. That's what I really believe. And what I'm trying to offer the American people is something very different than that. You know, it's a common sense agenda that's based on telling the truth about the challenges this country faces, an effort to try to unite a divided and fractured country through our politics, and I think that because I'm from Colorado, which is a state that's a lot like Iowa, I think my positions are actually much closer to where people in Iowa are than Elizabeth or Bernie's positions.
And both of them say Medicare for all, which would eliminate or mostly eliminate all private health care insurance. You don't go that far. Why not?
No, because I think it's a terrible plan, and I think it's terrible politics for Democrats. You know, but most important, I think it's a bad plan. There's no reason to make insurance illegal for everybody in America. That's Bernie's plan, which Elizabeth has signed up to, leaves only cosmetic insurance, which is insurance for I don't know.
Nose job or
yeah,
whatever.
Exactly, right. And then it's a $31 or $33 trillion tax increase on the American people at least, you know. And I think Bernie's been honest about his plan. A lot of other people haven't. But these aren't Republican talking points. These are Bernie's own talking points. So my question is, are the American people, are people in Iowa really ready to pay more taxes to the tune of 70% of the total amount of taxes we collect over the next 10 years? That's $31 trillion. For the privilege of giving up their choice to have private insurance. It is impossible to believe that that's where the American people
Senator
are.
Sanders has told me, though, that you do this, though, people won't go bankrupt anymore for medical bills.
Well, we need to not go bankrupt anymore for Medicare bills, which is why the medical bills, which is why I think my proposal is so much better, which is a public option, gives everybody in America the choice about whether they want to stay on private insurance. If they have it, get a public option, require the federal government to negotiate drug prices to get those drug prices down. And I think it would take us 3 years to have universal health care in this country. Whereas if we go down the road that Bernie and Elizabeth have led us, we're going to spend the next 10 years fighting a losing battle for Medicare for all. And that losing battle is never going to allow us to do what we can to create an economy that actually works for working people again in this country, to give people universal health care that they so desperately need, to go to work on climate and to reform our government. None of that stuff is going to be done if we're fighting this losing battle, which, by the way, only a third of Democrats support Medicare for all. Why would we be pursuing a policy that doesn't even unify the Democratic Party, much less the other people we need to win this election?
Do taxes go up under your plan to pay for it?
Yeah, to reverse. Well, first of all, you don't need any taxes on my plan on Medicare, Medicare X. In fact, the Congressional Budget Office has looked at it and says that because the premiums would actually be less for the public option than private insurance, it's net it saves the government money.
Okay, we had a related question to health care. Stephanie Peters had a question here. She wants specifically to know about your plan for mental health care for adults. She's saying if we had better funding, then we would see a lot of crimes go down because these folks would get treatment. How does
she's
that happen?
Completely right, and it's not just for adults. I can say as a former school superintendent, we desperately need it for kids as well. I just had a meeting in Des Moines not that long ago with people that are early childhood education providers, and your viewers should know that they brought up mental health over and over again because they said the challenge is much greater now than it was 5 5 or 10 years ago. Same for adults. And she's right. It's all about the money. And we got to have a set of priorities that says we're going to spend money on things that are important, investments that pay off, and investments in mental health care clearly pay off. We haven't really been investing in it since Ronald Reagan was president of the United States, so we have a lot of catching up to do.
Another one of our area leaders is concerned about bills, but specifically the essentially 33% of people here who can't afford an unexpected bill. Let's hear what's her concern.
If they had a flat tire or a health emergency, probably wouldn't have enough money in their savings account to cover those. So they're living very close to the edge. And we have not really kept up in Iowa with the cost of living. Our wage levels are still lower than what they need to be for families to thrive and to start to build assets.
All right, so she's concerned with, we have a lot of jobs here that don't pay enough, frankly. About half the jobs pay 40 grand or less, and she's saying something's got to change that. Is there anything a president can do to bump that?
This is what our whole campaign should be about, this question. If I had to summarize the last 10 years of my town halls in Colorado and now in Iowa, it's people coming saying we are working really hard, but we can't afford some combination of housing, health care, early childhood education, or higher education. We can't afford a middle-class life, is what people are saying. And for the families I used to work for in the Denver public schools who are living in poverty and are not coming to town halls because they're working 2 and 3 jobs, if they did come, what they'd say is, we're killing ourselves, and we can never get our kids out of poverty, no matter what we do. And that's why I propose what I propose, which is a substantial increase to the earned income tax credit, a huge increase to the child tax credit. It would reduce childhood poverty in this country by 40%. That's what the professors at Columbia University have said. It's not me. By almost 40%, it would end $2 a day poverty, and it would put money in the hands of hardworking middle-class people who actually need the tax cuts instead of the wealthy people that Donald Trump has, whose taxes they've cut. By the way, it would cost 3% of Bernie's Medicare for All plan. 3%. And we could say that 40% of the kids in America that today are in poverty would be out of poverty without adding one bureaucrat to the federal government.
All right, you talked about education. Let's take a break. When we come back on the other side of the break, let's talk about what you see your role would be as president when it comes to the cost of college and whether we need to pay our teachers more. We'll talk about that and more when our town hall with Senator Michael Bennet continues. Hall with Senator Michael Bennet. And Senator, we had one question that came in specifically about teacher pay. Let's take a listen to that.
We're asking teachers to do more and more in the classroom for not a lot of funding. So I think, you know, treating the teachers professionally, with respect, paying them for what the work that they're being asked to do.
That's Wendy Sawyer. She just retired as the principal of the Winterset Middle School, and they were just awarded one of those blue ribbon awards. What specifically, she didn't really have a number, but what do you think about this concept of the federal government's involvement in paying teachers more?
I think that we have to absolutely pay teachers more. Wendy's completely right about that. The reason we don't pay teachers more is that the entire system of hiring and paying and recruiting teachers that we have in America was developed in a labor market when we discriminated against women, and we said you have 2 professional choices. One's being a teacher and one's being a nurse. And if you stick with us for 30 years, we'll give you a pension that you can retire on, which sounded pretty good back then because your spouse was probably going to die before you. That is a ridiculously obsolete way of paying anybody in our society anymore, particularly teachers, and we're going to have to step up together and increase their pay and pay them like the professionals that they really are. I think the federal government can be responsible for some of that, but the reality is that states and local communities, which is where 91% of the funding comes from for education, are going to have to step up. Iowa's going to have to step up. Colorado's going to have to step up. A lot of our rural districts in my state are now on 4-day work weeks because they can't hire teachers anymore. And as a country, we're losing 50% of the people from the profession in the first 5 years. So we definitely have to pay people more. I think the federal government can help, but to be honest about it, it's really going to have to be state and local government that's going to have to do it.
Okay, I want to get to another topic here of an issue that has really consumed your colleagues on the House side, and that's impeachment inquiry. I had a question from Ray Smith through Facebook. And Ray wanted to know, I would ask everyone what they are doing to move toward impeachment. Where do you stand on that? At some point, if this would go through the House, it would come to the Senate, where you all would have to decide.
We'll have to decide. We'll have to vote whether we're going to convict or not if it gets there. The impeachment inquiry just started in the House. I'm glad they started it. I think every day that President Trump is unwilling to cooperate with the House and their legitimate constitutional...
And it's specifically about Ukraine and whether he pressured that president to look into Joe Biden.
Exactly. Right? And every day he refuses to cooperate, he's just inviting impeachment. And I hope this will be a moment in the country's history when the rule of law is going to win out over everybody and demonstrate once again that nobody's above the law, including Donald Trump and including his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, who today was basically, giving the middle finger to the House of Representatives. That's not going to end
And he has
well.
said he's not going to cooperate with the investigation,
That's right.
which he doesn't consider legit. You have supported the inquiry. We have about 30 seconds left, but you're not going full board for impeachment yet, though, correct?
Well, I think he committed impeachable offenses. I believe that. I think that when you see what he did, both in terms of his conversation with Ukraine and what he did with the obstruction of justice that the Mueller probe reported, I don't even think that's a close question. But we also need to make sure that we have a process in place that gives the American people confidence in the judgments that we make, both in the impeachment inquiry, if that ends in impeachment, and in a conviction in the Senate, if it ends in conviction.
All right, money was part of that. When we come back, we want to talk about money on a couple of fronts here. We had numerous questions on the power of money in Washington and also the costs of the government not paying its bills. Those questions and more from the Senator when we come back. Welcome back to this live town hall. This question came in from S. Ringenberg. How are you going to reduce the national debt, which is out of control? So, Senator Michael Bennet, what are you going to do about that $22 trillion?
Let me say, first of all, thank you for asking the question, because nobody ever asked the question. And I can report that in the 10 years that I'm in the Senate, it's been clear to me that Democrats don't care about the debt back there, and Republicans say they care, but don't care. And the fiscal hypocrisy that is represented by McConnell and Trump is incredible. I mean, these guys ran on paying the debt off in 7 years, and now it's $22 trillion, probably going to 30. We're actually going to have a $2 trillion deficit, going to $2 trillion at a time when we have full employment. It's almost defies the laws of physics. We're going to have to do something about raising revenue in this country, and we're going to have to reduce health care costs, because we are collecting 16% of our economy in revenue, 16% of GDP, and we're spending 22% of that. The in-between of that is the deficit, and it is deeply unfair. People say deficits don't matter in Washington. I don't agree with that, because it is reducing the scope of decisions that the next generation is going to be able to make on their own, and at the same time that we're putting all this debt on their shoulders, we're cutting our investment in them by more than a third since Reagan was president. So the reason why college costs so much in this country and people have to take out their student loans is we're no longer supporting the kids in school with taxpayer-funded education, and instead we're just layering on the debt. And how we spend the money is important too. Let me just finish by saying this. Since 2001, as a country, we have borrowed $5 trillion from the Chinese for the privilege of giving the richest people in America tax cuts, to drive income inequality up in this country rather than address it. We have borrowed $5.6 trillion from the Chinese for the privilege of fighting 20-year wars in the Middle East. And from the vantage point of people like the woman who asked the question earlier about what are you going to do to help work pay again in this country, we might as well have lit that money on fire. We could have invested, fixed every road and bridge, and we could have paid teachers 50% more, given preschool to kids, and paid down our debt and made Social Security solvent. We did none of that. So if I were president, I can tell you this, we'd stop doing what Washington's been doing for the last 20 years and start doing something else, and slowly but surely we'll dig our way out of the debt that we're in.
All right, we got a question from a high schooler in Norwalk, name of Parker Wood. Hi, I'm actually a kid I'd like to know how much it
He's
costs
like, I'm a
you.
kid. Stop putting
That's
that
right.
debt on top.
How much does it cost for you to campaign? Parker wants to know.
Well, it's
What's it cost to run for president?
Thank you for asking. It costs hundreds of millions of dollars in the end to run for president. My campaign is far less expensive than that.
So you raised like $2 the last
Right.
quarter, and that's about 1/10 of what Sanders did, for
Right,
example, or
right,
Warren did.
yeah.
So how do you compete money-wise, and what's the
Well,
role?
it means that I have to go to the previous question. I have to be fiscally responsible with my own campaign, and I have to make decisions. And the decision that I made was that I wasn't going to use the money that I raised to continue to try to launder campaign contributions, paying $70 for every dollar to get on that debate stage that's going to drive everybody crazy tonight. And instead, I'm using the money to talk to Iowa, and that's been my advertising buy that I've got, but it's also paid staff that I have all over the state. So the real answer to Parker is also there's too much money in our politics, and we need to get the money out of our politics and get people back in. And we're working hard to try to do that.
All right, we need to take one final break. When we come back, we'll have a question for the senator to make him think about what he has been doing lately. We'll continue our town hall next. Kathy Westerkamp writes in with this one. What's one positive thing you have accomplished for the country in the last 6 months, Senator Michael Bennet?
Thank you for that question. When I was deciding whether to run for president or not, my oldest daughter, Caroline, said, Dad, if you run and tell the truth and you lose, no one can fault you for it. And I said to her, as I was deciding whether to run, Caroline, that's good because there's really no other reason for me to run, and there's no other way for me to win. And just 2 or 3 months ago, the Des Moines Register had an editorial that ran in the paper that said, Michael Bennet pounds truth into this campaign. And at the end of the editorial, it said that even if you've committed to other candidates, you should take a look at Bennet because he really is talking about the challenges that we're facing and real solutions to those challenges. So I think that's something positive that I've done for the country at a moment when politicians are spending more of their time repeating talking points or just responding to what's going on social media every day. And the reason I care so much about the truth is I know how hard the kids are working in the old school district where I was superintendent, how hard the teachers are working in the Denver public schools, and how poorly served they're being by our government in Washington, D.C. We've got to drag ourselves out of this political moment.
We have about a minute left here, and this is an inside politics question, and kind of a hard one, too. But for those watching, they're going to watch tonight. They have 12 people who've qualified to be on this debate stage, and you did not. There are a lot of choices for Democrats. So why should they not give up on you and look at that and say this guy can't win?
Oh, I think this is early. Iowans will tell you it's early. The fact that the DNC has decided that they want to make decisions about who moves forward on the debate stage or the national networks do, that's not how Iowa is going to make its decision. I don't think I need to persuade Iowa of that. What I need to do is be able to run a compelling campaign here that shows that I've got a theory for how not just to unite the Democratic Party, but win back some of the 9 people who voted twice for Barack Obama and once for Donald Trump. And I think I have the plan that does that. I believe that somebody coming from the middle of our country rather than from the 2 coasts is going to be more likely to beat Donald Trump. And I look forward to meeting everybody in Iowa over the next 3 months or so.
Does this mean if you do not qualify for November, you're still in it? Sticking in it?
I'm sticking in it. I think that, I really want to make this case going into Iowa and New Hampshire that we can't have another 10 years or 20 years, for that matter, of a political system like the one we've got in Washington, D.C.
All right, Senator Michael Bennet, appreciate the time. Thanks for answering the questions. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining us for the Town Hall. The News at 5 is next.